Tell me, no problem.
Okay. I'd like to welcome Rabbi Moshe Weiss, a good friend, but benoisef to that, he's also a very big Talmid Chacham. Writes, serves as a shliach in California, but also as a Rav. And he just, we ever saw in the Koftzei Haaretz, his name appears in the last 35 years, on a regular basis. And the books, Sfarim that just came to Kailo, the Matzah Tov that you saw, 2 volumes, is his a collection of his some of his writings on certain topics. He has other books that are in process, but those these are the first of the sets that are going to come out. It's a great honor for us to have him here. I was waiting for the opportunity that he should be in town, he should have time. Baruch Hashem, he came for Kinnus HaShluchim, and he's not running away right away. So we had the opportunity of having Rabbi Weiss here in Kailo. Rabbi Weiss, bechavod.
The Gemara in Seif Perek Tes the Bracha says, Kishigiu Chachamim Arabanan L'Kerem B'Yavna Paschu Chachamim B'Kvei Dachsanya Pasach Rabbi Yehuda Reish HaMedabrim B'Kvei Dachsanya. So before I say anything, I just want to echo what my dear friends Harav Agon Rav Shochat, Rav Agon Rav Shraga. You should know that if you think that 309 New York Avenue is limited, confined, just to this area or this block or this shchuna, you should know that what you're doing here is an incredible effort and something that has reverberations throughout the world, throughout the Chabad world. I also want to thank my dear friend, Rav Shlomi Greenwald, who I guess is one of the major supporters. It says you're not allowed to be envious. The Rebbe Nayim Yoim says that when it comes to Gashmius, you should never look at somebody else, you should never look. But when it comes to Ruchnius, you should be envious. It's no secret, and I'll say it on tape, that one of the issues that the Welt has with Chabad, with Lubavitch, with Jungelite, is the erroneous assumption that there's no Torah. As Rabbi Shochat mentioned, I gave out a sefer recently. It was reluctant, but the reason I gave it out was because exactly of the comments that I'm getting, which is, we never knew that Lubavitch learns. We never knew that in Likutei Sichos there's lamdus. So you should know that what you're doing here is not just for yourself, which is meridic, tremendous. You're so lucky to have 2 Ga'inim, 2 Lamdim, I know them well. And it's not a empty statement to learn from, to squeeze from. But what you're doing is a tremendous shlichus. And ashrecha, ashrechem, and I hope you continue, you take this with you for the rest of your lives, that wherever you go, learning should be the foundation of your day. And wherever you go and you have a hashpah on somebody, that hashpah should be in learning, not in sports, chaz v'shalom. I know that it's not, but I'm just giving an example of some people feel that in order to be niskabel by balabatim, be niskabel by other people, they have to talk in minig amakim. You should know that it's tremendously not like that. People respect, people look up to you with the inyanim of learning. So having said that, I'm going to share with you an inyan that I wrote many years ago. Hasn't been printed yet in a sefer, in my sefer. And it's something slightly negea l'maisa. I understand that you're learning Even Ezer, so it's slightly negea to Even Ezer. L'maisa, I got this shaila many times, 35 years ago, and I decided to write about it. It's hard for me to believe that this shaila is very relevant today, and you'll see later on why. However, it's shayach that it's relevant, and it's a nice inyan to discuss, a nice inyan in Lamdus. L'Rabbis, that lately I found out that there's a beautiful answer from the Rebbe regarding this inyan. regarding this topic to somebody that Chashuv Yid that is still within the year of the Yud Beis Chaydish, and I'll tell it to you at the end of this year something very relevant from the Rebbe. So the shaila is Kumta younger man, and his whole inyan is to be Makarev Yidin, and he was machlit that his shlichus is going to be to make shidduchim between two Jews, two Yidden. That's all he does. And that's, I'm not saying that's all he does, excuse me, meaning that's his ikir nekuda. And he came to ask a shaila, and it actually happened to me once, and I asked the shaila, if the couple said explicitly that this whole concept of having the woman go into a pool of water to cleanse herself is something that b'shita we are not going to do. It's something that is degrading, and it's something that is archaic and old-fashioned. So Rabbi Hineni Machriz Umeidiya that forget about it. Forget about this inyan of going to the mikveh. So he came to ask a shaila whether he's permitted to be misadik kiddushin, whether he's permitted to facilitate A, such a shidduch, and B, to be the misadik kiddushin. So the truth is, there's tremendous writing about this, a lot of tshuvas, Igis Moshe, there's many tshuvas from Kadmainim, Mincha Shleimer, Reb Shlomo Zalman, Shulchan HaEzer, which is, I'm sure you know, is a wonderful sefer on Even HaEzer, Meishiv Dover from the Nitziv. The Gedolim write about this in a very big way. I believe that I'll be able to add something in this year, L'dekavosenu, something that we will appreciate. So of course, the main nekuda that goes, that this sugya Seiva V'Hoilach is the sugya of Lifnei Iver Misayeya. The sugya of Lifnei Iver Misayeya. So the Gemara says like this, the Gemara in Psachim says, Tanya, Reb Nosson Aimer, very famous Gemara, very well-known Gemara, Minayin shlo yoshid adam keis yayin l'nazir, ve'evir min achai lifnei noyach, Talmud Leimar, v'lifnei Iver loi sitein michshol. The Rebbe in Lekutei Sichos, Chelik Chavzayin, Parshas Kedoshim, has a wonderful explanation on this Nekuda, on this Sikha, on the Rashi. Rashi says that you shouldn't give an Eitzah she'eino higenes. So the Rebbe wants to know, why is it that the Rashi changes from the Pshutei Shel Mikra? Maybe it means that don't be a cruel person. When somebody's walking down the street and he's blind, le'aleinu, don't put a block, don't put a box in front of him and have a good laugh at his expense. So the Rebbe answers, Kedarke B'Kodesh, we already know this from another sugya in Chumash, the sugya of Beir, that you're not allowed to be gaidim at takala. So therefore, we must say that Lifnei Iver le'sitin michshol must mean something else. Okay, this is so the Gemara from the Gemara. This Gemara in Psachim. It's verstandig that what is the iser? The iser is l'shlo yoshit, that the person shouldn't give a kais yayin l'nazir, even if and it's aser even if he knows that the nazir is a lamdin, or he knows that it's aser. Nevertheless, there's an iser on me. There's an iser on the person to be moishit the kais yayin l'nazir. The Gemara by Yitkotten, Daf Yud Zayin, talks about, he says, Amaisa, beautiful story, Amsa de Bei Rebbe, the maid of Rebbe, who we know would answer Shilas. So she saw somebody that was hitting B'nai Agadol. So she said, this person should be B'shamta, Levi Halugar B'shamta, the Ka'avar Mishum Lifnei Iver Le'sitin Michshol, because Makeh B'nai Agadol, Rashi says that since he's a Gadol, what's going to happen is he's going to be Mevayit and he'll be Machshel. So what do we see from here? We see another very important nekuda besides the Gemara in Psachim, that even though later there will be an Isser. In other words, the person hit his son now, and Amsa the Rebbe said that later they're going to be gaidim takala to somebody. The Bnei Agadol will end up hitting the father, not right away. It's also Isser. Now we have probably the most important Gemara in this sugya of Lifnei Iver is the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Davav. Rabbi Nosson, the Gemara brings down the same Gemara of Psachim. And the Gemara says, when there's a chiluk, there's a t'nai, when are you Iver and Lav Lifnei Iver? So the Gemara Lashon is the Koi B'trei Ibrei Nara, where it's in a situation, the Gemara uses a metaphor that he's on two sides of the river. He's on two sides there's no way that the Nazir, for example, is able to get the Kais Yayin by himself. If it wouldn't be that I would reach out from one side of the river to give it to him. So if in such a case, then I'm over Koi B'trei Ibrei Nara. Or the Gemara Rashi says, "Eivid kechavim mitzadzeh, v'Yisrael mitzadzeh, di layoyv leile matzi shakel." Now the Gemara, of course, is machalik between chad ibrei nara, where, in other words, both are in a situation where he can get himself, he can walk into a liquor store, he can walk into his house and get a kais yayin, and even if I wouldn't give it to him, he'd be able to get it. So the fact that I'm giving it to him is l'chayra le'maisif shum davar. So chad ibrei nara, there's no isser of lifnei iver. Trei ibrei nara, there's an isser of lifnei iver. Okay, and there's a very interesting maram shik. There's a Maram Shik on mitzvahs. It's a wonderful sefer. The Maram Shik talks about this inyan of Eitzah or Nazir or any other thing, that what happens if the person decides not to accept it. I'm Trei B'rei Nara, and I reach out, and the Nazir doesn't want to take it. He says, I'm a Nazir. Was I over the Yisr? So it's very interesting sugya in it as well. Okay. Kol panim. So what do we, so now, L'gabe this inyan, whether chad ibrei nara is completely innocent, so to speak, or is completely mutter, which is mashma from the Gemara Avodah Zarah Davav, there's three important shittas in the Rishonim. L'gabe this inyan. The Rambam in the Sefer HaMitzvahs, Rich Sadik Tes, he brings down the pasuk. He brings down also the inyan of Shim Yisholcha Eitzah B'Dover Sheni Baki. He writes like this. He brings down the Nekuda that lavza koilel gam mishim misayeya oy germa lefi shehu bala isay adam shesama taiva. In other words, basically, the Rambam is not mechalik. The Rambam doesn't accept the chiluk of the Gemara Avodah Zarah at lahalacha, or at least not lemaisa, but more lahalacha. The Rambam doesn't accept whether it's chad ibrei nara, trei ibrei nara. The Gemara says the Rambam wants to say it's still aser, hamal v'beribis, alei v'beribis, all these things. Shnei emervim ufnei ivlei sit in milchol, it's a din in ribis. Even though he can get the loan from somebody else, the Rambam is not mechalik. There's a mefurish Rambam, not just in Sefer HaMitzvahs, but in Hilchos Kilayim. If somebody's malbish chaveri kilayim, if the levish is mezid, the levish is leiken, the malbish is able to nivsh milchol, and it doesn't bring down the nekudah, the chiluk, whether he can get it somewhere else or not. Hilchos Naziris, hamitamis hanazir, mezid, leike, etc., etc. Hilchos Avel, hamitamis hakayin, im hayushnei mezidim. B'kitzur, he doesn't bring down any chiluk between. He doesn't bring down any condition, whether it's chad ibrei nara, trei ibrei nara. Any time you are assisting a bal aveda, an avedanik, somebody who wants to do an aveda, you're leike, and l'chayda, that's the das harosh, etc. And some people say it's taisus also. So that's one. So then you have the Shittas Haran, which is a very crucial Shitta. The Ran says that minatayra, you're talking not over on Lifnei Iver if it's chad ibrei nara. Minatayra, but midrabanan mitzad misayeya, because you also mitzad lafrisha meiser, you have to be mafresh somebody meiser, and you're yisayeya, so you're over. So, in other words, midiraisa you're talking not over, but midirabanan you're over linyan. Then you have shittas ataisvis. Shittas ataisvis in Avodah Zarah over there. He basically says that it doesn't matter. Bein min atayra, bein midrabanan, chad ibrei nara is muter legamri. The only isser is shnei ibrei nara. In other words, he says it clear, not like the Rambam. He says it clear that trei ibrei nara is aser, chad ibrei nara is muter. So, anyways, we have our three shittas. Shittas Rambam, misayeya is always over min atayra, and he's not mechalik between trei ibrei nara, chad ibrei nara. You're always over. The Ram says midraisa you're over only if If it's Chadir Brenara, but Midrabanan, you're always over, not only Mitzad Lifnei Iver, but you're over Mitzad Misayeya. Taisus learns that by Chadir Brenara, and you can get it from somebody else, doesn't matter, there's no asur. Now, Lahalacha, the Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Kuf Nun Aleph, talks about Hilchas Avodah Zarah. So the Mechaber, it's a Mechaber Ramah. So the Mechaber paskins that you're not allowed to sell a goy Avodah Zarah, getchkes. You're not allowed to sell him true Avodah Zarah, unless you did something to the getchke, you did something to Avodah Zarah to negate it, to stop it from being a valid Avodah Zarah. The Ramah writes, the Ramah says, Yeshayimnim, what you're not allowed to sell is dafka if there's nobody else selling. If you're the only guy in town selling Avodah Zarah. If you're the only guy in town selling Avodah Zarah, or he cannot get it anywhere else, but if the guy is able to get his Avodah Zarah from somewhere else, there's nothing wrong. Muter lim kalam kol davar. Mamish Ramak is a klor, you're allowed to. And he brings on a samartcha, perikam adaveis kechavim. But he says, and this always creates issues, v'yesh machmirim, there are those that are machmir. Says the Ramah, the nagu lahakal kisvar rishayna. The minig is limekel that you're allowed to if there's somebody else selling Avodah Zarahs. Bal nefesh yachmir la'atzmai. If you're a bal nefesh, you should be machmir. So what do we see from here? We see clearly the Mechaber paskins like the Ran that you're not at it. You're helping your Messiah to be over Aveda. Your Messiah to be over Sinida. I hesitate this sentence because unfortunately we live in a world where we know that and if you're going to be if you're not going to be Mesadik kiddushin, they're not going to be living Bisinida or didn't they, But I guess there is a certain, first of all, we don't know, and this is another sugya that I'm sure the Rosh Kollel can talk about. To what level, to what extent do we have to investigate, etc., what a person did, what a person, the very interesting shaila that I'm sure you've learned and I'm sure you've heard about. What about the sugya of writing bisula in a ksuba? Whether if the Baal, the Igros Moshe, the Moshe writes that if the chassan is makabel on himself the chi of mamani, you could write whatever you want. Something I don't quite understand, but I'll leave that for another shir or for somebody else to talk about. So the question is, to what extent do you have to investigate when a boy and a girl, a chas and kala, come to you, and let's say they're not living together in an apartment or in a house. Let's say I've had cases where I had a case more than once where a boy and a girl came to me. And they asked me if whatever they tell me will be confidential, and I assured them for sure. And they told me they have a problem. They come from houses. One of them was very very balabatish, and the Masada Kiddushin was going to be a very famous Rebbe, and they didn't know what to do because they were living together, and they didn't know how to deal with it because they had no idea how this Rebbe, this Heilige Rebbe, is going to react when he finds out, and they came to me for advice what to do. So you have situations where people are somewhat nizer, and if they say, listen, we're going to be honest with you, we're not going to keep taharas hamishpacha, what do you do? So we just went through the sugyas, let's continue a little bit. So, l'chayra, let's analyze the shittas. According to the Rambam, even chad ibrei nara is asim min ha-Torah, so the Mesadik kiddushin l'chayra is in a serious predicament. According to the Ran, where even if it's chad ibrei nara, it's muter min ha-Torah, but it's asim mid'Rabbanan, it's a Messiah. And I feel like Shittas HaTaisves, who writes that it's muter, the Ramah just said that Bal Nefesh Yachmer. And we all know the story of, the famous story of Reb Pinchas Reizes, who asked the Alter Rebbe, who told the Alter Rebbe about the inyan of Pasaba Bekisnin, and I think he ate some lekach in front of the Alter Rebbe when he was going to Chachamim, to Minsk, whatever, to be Mizbakeach. So the Alter Rebbe told him, Pinchas, didn't you learn my Shulchan Aruch that about Pasaba B'Kisnin? So the Pinchas told him, aber dort steht only a Bal Nefesh. So the Alter Rebbe told him, if I knew that you didn't consider yourself a Bal Nefesh, well, didn't gehandelt. If I thought that you weren't a Bal Nefesh, I wouldn't even deal with you. So l'chayda, all of us, Chasidim, Shluchim, Mekusharim, we would want to be a Bal Nefesh. So we're in a dilemma. What do you do over here? So there is a Makam Lahatir, Umikama Taimin. So the Gemara in Masechta Avodah Zarah says like this. Tanya, Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. Tanya, Omer Adam Lachaveirei Ulapayalov. A person could say to his friend or to his workers, L'chu v'ichlu b'din hazeh. Go and take this $1 and go have lunch. You're a worker. It's lunchtime. I'm buying you lunch, and he doesn't have to worry whether it's Shemitah, whether it's Meiser. So l'chayda fragt the Ritva. Amar Dikakasha, what do you mean you do ein chayshish? L'chayda it's lifnei iver. If there's only Meiser stuff or Shemitah stuff there, l'chayda is iver lifnei iver. Says the Ritva Amar Dikavart. The Ritva says, you know what it means? The Isser of lifnei iver. Hoishit kais yayin l'nazir. When you're giving the nazir a kais yayin, you're giving him the actual thing. You're giving him the actual Isser. But if you're not giving him the actual Isser, you're giving him $1 to go buy a cup of wine. You're giving an alcoholic $1 or $5 to go buy a cup of wine. Zakti Ritva, that's not lifnei iver. Das ist nicht lifnei iver. Lifnei iver is minayin shle yoshit kais yayin l'nazir. Okay. So we have the Paskim or the Mefarshim explain the Ritva a little bit more. I'm not going to get into it now. That the Kavanah of the Ritva is mitzat safek. If there's a safek, that whether this guy is going to buy Meiser, maybe he'll go a block more, he'll go to the store where there's no Meiser stuff, where there's no Shemitah stuff, or he'll find somebody. So that's what the Ritva says. If mitzat safek, if you have a safek, a doubt in the issue, doesn't go into lifnei iver. Okay. So Din Didan, you're coming a nice Jewish boy and girl al pirov. That you're mishtadel, they come to you dafka to be misadik kiddushin. They come to you dafka. Who says they won't? Who says they won't be do hilchos tara? I have to say a story that I heard from Manis Friedman. And it's a good story, because it's a true story. So Manis Friedman, it used to be one of his famous stories. I don't know if he still says it now, but it used to be one of his famous stories. That he met a couple who were married 10 years, and he told them and they had some issues, and he told them about taharas hamishpacha, and he told them that l'chayda, if they start keeping taharas hamishpacha, the issues will be resolved. And they were very, very impressed, or they were very receptive. And they said that, how come nobody told us? How come nobody told us this? So Manis asked them where they came from, who was their Misadik, who was Makar of them, and they told him. So he says a few months later, or a few weeks later, he met this rabbi from another city, and he said, I want to give you regards from so-and-so, this couple. He says, oh, really? How are they doing? He says, well, actually, they're very angry at you. He says, why are they very angry at me? So he told him the story, because you never even told them about taharas hamishpacha. He says, I never thought they would care. I never thought they would be interested. The word is, that our inyan, of course, is to try. Our inyan is to speak. Our inyan is to teach. Whether they will do it later or not, that's thing. And more often than not, they will. So that's the Ritva. The Ritva says that if there's a suffix, whether they will do it or not, that's not lifnei iver. Okay. Now, what about a situation, unfortunately, where it's clear, it's not a suffix. They say, you know what, sorry, we're not doing it. Don't expect us to, I'll tell you a slightly personal story. Comes in my Beis Chabad, I'm a little bit straight-laced. I don't really get out of my Agdaras, except for Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah, I get a little bit out of Hagdaras. So one year, Simchas Torah, there was a balabas of mine, actually one of my more prominent balabatim, that became very frum, extremely frum, but his wife and his family weren't. So, but we were very friendly with them, and they came Simchas Torah by night, and I was a little biggie lufin. And she came to me, she said, we were friendly, but not as, so to speak, a paisik or a rabbinical terms, as people, go out to dinner once in a while, we makar of them. So I said, Susie, I want to ask you something. And I had no idea. What I wanted to say was she shouldn't bother her husband so much about coming to shul. That was the extent of my request. And she says, Rabbi, if you're going to talk to me about the pool, stop. Don't even say it. So I say, yeah, I'm going to talk to you about the pool. And the Rebbe should help that it worked. At least she was in a situation where all she needed to do was to go to be cheskes tara, but at least it worked. So the nekuda is that David should help to try. But what happens if a situation comes and the couple says, forget about it. There's no way that I'm going to go to the mikveh. I feel it's degrading. A little mashal. So I found Baruch Hashem a diuk in the Alter Rebbe that Baruch Hashem gives a tzad heter. The Gemara, the Mechaber writes in Shin Mem Zayin about Lagabe Eitzah, says like this. The Mechaber, the Shulchan Aruch writes in Pashat Yodi Lifnim v'chayfetz biyadei. The person puts his hand inside the Rosh Hashayachid v'chayfetz biyadei v'niach l'tech yad shel chaveri ha'imid bifnim. The first Mishnah in Masechta Shabbos. Pashat Lifnim v'nat l'chayfetz yad shel chaveri ha'imid bifnim. Whatever is akar v'niach chayav b'chaveri pater avalasif. The first Mishnah in Masechta Shabbos. So up to Magen Avram. That the Mekal Makayim, even though it's not really, he didn't do anything completely wrong, because why? Because what you're doing is you're causing the person to make a akira and anacha, and even though it's not really midiraisa, but midirabanan says the Magen Avram, like the Ran, it's asur. So therefore he says, up to Magen Avram, that you're not allowed to lend a person kli malacha, you're not allowed to lend a person a lawnmower Friday, a lawnmower. If you feel that he's going to do it on Shabbos, your neighbor has only one day to fix his lawn, and he comes to you. He says, "Can I borrow some tools? Because tomorrow I'm going to cut my grass, so I'm going to water my lawn." So says the Magen Avram, you're not allowed to do it. As long as, unless you know for sure that there's a way that he'll do it beheter, he'll do it on Sunday or whatever, something like that. Alter Rebbe in Shin Mem Zayin Siv Dalid brings down the din of the Magen Avram, clear, but he adds one word. He adds one word, and that word changes everything. This is the Lashon HaKadesha from the Alter Rebbe. Also lahashul kli melacha b'Shabbos liYisrael hachashud lasis melacha b'Shabbos. Afilu hu kli hamatzil leilishol u'makam acher. So it's clear, the Magen Avram doesn't bring down b'Shabbos. The Magen Avram is chayshit even if you're going to lend this person the kelim before Shabbos, if he's chayshit. Lashon Azov and the Alter Rebbe is that it has to be dafka b'Shabbos. Dafka on Shabbos when it's usher, when it's already usher to do the malacha, that's when you're not allowed to do it. Before Shabbos, you're allowed to lend them. Reb Nosson Gestetner, I'm sure you're all aware, he wrote a set of svarim called Lahedus Nosson, Shuvas Lahedus Nosson. If you ever come across a sugya that he writes about, I highly recommend it. It's simply beautiful shuvas. So Reb Nosson Gestetner, brings down this Alter Rebbe in Chelik Hey Siman Samach Zayin, and he says that he asks a kasha and he wants to be mechalik, but he leaves this Alter Rebbe b'tzarachi and gadol. He brings down the Alter Rebbe, he tries to discuss the shittis, whether it's matzi, ain't matzi, but anyways, you can't get away from the diuk. He himself agrees that the Alter Rebbe is mekel over the Magen Avram, that dafke b'Shabbos it's aser. So what do we see? We see from here that even according to the Alter Rebbe, even according to the Ran, that there's an isur midrabanan b'chad ibrei nara, it's only bisman ha'aveda. In other words, simply like we just said before, moishit kais yayin l'nazir. You're giving mamish the cup of wine to a nazir and he's going to drink it now. That's aser. But somebody that the gufa, in a situation where the gufa aveda, the actual act will be done much later, leichashina. And I found, Baruch Hashem, a klorer raya to the Alter Rebbe in the Bach, in Archaim, Simin Kuf Samach Tes. So he says over there what happens about Netilas Yadayim. Mishalei Natal Yadov, the Oiver Miyad, Va'asa Losis Lalechem Lechel, Ubein Haneisen Libisheni De Lavarach Deshari. Umevai Rabach says the Bach, the Mikivan Shebishah Sheneisen Lei. Eine Oiver, Says the Bach, the Isser of giving somebody lechem when he didn't do until his yadayim is only if he's going to do it right away, but not if he's not going to do it later. And whatever. Now, the Rabbi Chil Yaakov Weinberg, who dealt with this shaila extensively in Shalos and Shuvas Sidei Eish, also a very beautiful sefer, very beautiful set of tshuvas. He brings a raya from a Mishnah Meforeshus in Gittin, and it's Lagabe Shmita, that Mashal Esishal Chavet Achshud Al Shvias Nafel Kvara, etc. Rashi Mneshasal Say Biyad Adam B'Shas HaAveda. Rashi says clearly this lashon B'Shas HaAveda. Asal Esayeh Biyadayim. Mashma Bara that only B'Fnei Shas HaAveda it's mutter. Same thing says the Ksaf Sefer. The Ksaf Sefer in Yeridei Simin Pei Gimel. The Kol She'enim Esayeh Mamish L'Guf HaAveda V'Hu Shaloi B'Shas HaAveda is leka klalisim misayeya. The same thing, binyan siyan, is also the same thing, the same nakuda. Now, it's very interesting that, okay, so very interesting, Reb Vosner in Shut Shevet Halevi was asked an interesting shaila. If a person is allowed to sell non-sneas clothing in a Jewish environment, Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv, or a city where you can't doubt that Roiv people are Jewish. So he was asked if you're allowed to sell begodim she'enim snuyim. So he answers based on this nakuda. He says that since it's not Shasa Aveda, the Shasa Aveda will be done only much later, and you're not Misayeh Lagufa Aveda. And the same thing, there's another sniff, because could be that the person buying this beged, She'eina Tsanua, is not going to use it only that way. It'll be used in conjunction or in together with another beged, so maybe it won't be not Tsanua. Says the Shevet Halevi, therefore you're allowed to have a store in Tel Aviv that sells non-sneas clothing. He says, to be fair, to be honest, he finishes over there, he says, somebody who, this is not a nice job for a Jewish boy. And Ravadi Yosef says that even maybe b'diavad you're allowed to, but l'chachili you shouldn't do this, not because of the Yisrael Lifnei Iver, so it's just a derech pritzis. Okay, so coming to the finish line, so what do we gain from all this? That a person is able to be Mesadik kiddushin to a couple, even though he knows for sure, and she says clearly, I'm not going to the mikveh. And because why? Because based on this Alter Rebbe, Ksaf Sefer, and the other paskim that we brought down, the Bach, etc., since the Isser will be only much later after the Maisa Kiddushin, and the Isser Lifnei Iver is only B'Shasa Aveda Mamish, etc. So there's another Nakuda, which talks to us specifically, and with this I will basically finish. The Sidei Eish says a Meridik heter, which is unusual. You wouldn't believe that a Paisik would use this heter in Lifnei Iver. So he's the only guy I saw that says this. He says, Mokim sha'machshil miskaven lases mitzvah ein bazeh mishum Lifnei Iver. If the machshil, for whatever reason, whatever situation, his kavanah is not chas v'shalom to do an aveda, that the other person should do something bad. He doesn't want the nazir to drink wine. Whatever. This is a perfect example. The machshil is lasis mitzvah. Chaz v'shalom, they shouldn't go to reform, or they shouldn't live without chuppah v'kiddushin, v'chulu. There's no issue lifnei iver. Lifnei iver is only when the machshil has a kavanah to do an aveda. And he brings a raya. He brings a raya from a Rambam, Hilchos Reitzeach, Perik Yud Beis. it says like this: Kol hamachshir iver b'dover, v'heisi eitza she'ena egenes loy, shechizik dei v'aveda shu iver ve'ena roye derech ha'emes, mipnei taivas liboy, harei za'over b'lei sasei shnamar lifnei v'tzlum michshel. So the Sidur asks, how come somebody's over machshel t'chaveda? If a person knows it as an iser, a person knows it's chayil lifnei iver. So he says, everything he knows, all the isurim of misayeya. So musbeh the mitzad asvara, that when there's a way to, that the kavana is, he's to do a mitzvah. Maybe through this the person will start keeping Tara, or start having raising a Jewish home. Who knows what's going to happen as a result of your Siddur kiddushin? So you're allowed to do it. So. Sorry, what? Yeah.
When the guy's giving stock up to the onion and Shabbos, it's also a mitzvah, no?
We didn't mention that case, did we?
Lending a lawnmower.
Lending a lawnmower, is that a mitzvah? It's not a mitzvah. I don't believe it's a mitzvah. No, because the first of all could be they won't be together until after she finishes her niddah. And so that's mamish. I believe when it says shlei b'shas aveda, it means even the chuppah is 8 o'clock and they're going to be in their room at 12 o'clock. I think that's what it means. Anyways, so zois teiras ha'ela. There's 3 reasons that we could be matir somebody. Number 1, to make a shidduch between 2 people that are in shema teira mitzvahs, and number 2, to be misadi kiddushin. Number 1, there's a suffix midei seikel leyot. We don't know what's going to be. We don't know. They say now that they're not going to be, they're not going to have taharas hamishpacha. We don't know what's going to be. Number 2, because since the siyua and the act of the aveda are on 2 different times, there's no isil lifnei either, like the Alter Rebbe, the Ksav Sefer, v'chulu kadayhem gedolim elu lismech aleim, and also heichad the miskaven l'mitzvah. Says the Sidur, when you have a kavanah to do a mitzvah, there's no lifnei iver. Says the Chelkas Yaakov, which is also, again, it's not my business to. One second, let me just finish. I'll mamish one paragraph, and then I'll be happy to try to answer anything. So one of the most beautiful tshuvas that exist in the tshuva world is Rav Yaakov Breish, Chelkas Yaakov. He talks about this in Chelak Aleph, Minchas Yitzchak, other things. They say, you know what? Tumateva. The best thing is try, and usually it works. They're right. Try at least to tell them, and this is important for what I'm about to say. Try at least to tell them that in my honor or in my thing, go to the mikveh before the wedding. Go to the mikveh, go to the Rebbitzin, learn taharas hamishpacha, and that's what we all do. At least in California, at least what I'm aware of. When a couple comes to a shliach, even today, they call me, they ask me, or I think most people do it. They say, I'll be happy to be misadi kiddushin, but I would love for the kala to go to the mikveh before. And by the way, 99% of the time they feel so spiritually energized, and they feel so beautiful. They thank you for the opportunity that you made them go to the mikveh. So I'd just like to add that recently there was a tzettel that was written, that was printed in I believe in a Tura, I'm not mistaken. My nephew, Mara Dahai Shmaitza of Gittin and Chuppah v'Kiddushin, Harav Mordechai Farkash, told me that there was a tzettel, a note, an answer written to Harav Yosef Rosenfeld, who is still within the years, so it's Chusei Yogen Aleinu, Samach V'nira to Oleteira. So he was a shliach in San Francisco in the early 50s. So he wrote to Rebbe. There's a tshuva and a tshuva of an answer to him, and the Rebbe writes, "Be'im yekaimu hatnai, nochin sheyisad lehem kiddushin." That's how it's printed in the tshuva. So Reb Mordechai called up Rabbi Rosenfeld before he passed away. And I guess he heard about this tshuva, and he asked him, actually maybe the tshuva came out before he passed, I'm not sure. But however, Ramotcha called him up clearly, and he asked him, he says, what was the shaila? What was the tnai that the Rebbe is referring to? So he said that the case was this case. A couple came to him and told him that there's no, they don't want to commit to taharas hamishpacha, but they want him to be misadi kiddushin. And he wants to make a condition that they go to the mikveh beforehand. So he asks the Rebbe if he's right, if he was right, or is he allowed to do it? What should he do? So the Rebbe answered him, Bim yikaimu hatnai, which means at least going to the mikveh before. So muter l'zadi kiddushin. Anyways, we should be zeicha to be marbe kedusha v'tara b'Yisrael. Thank you for your time. If I can answer any questions, I'll be happy to. I don't know that I can answer, but...
Assuming that they didn't go to mikveh before, they're an Isser Yichud for Anida, and that's happening right away in Chidei Yichud.
Is it right away? It's 20 minutes later. I mean...
The couple, they put the ring on the kiss.
Yichud, yeah. Are you causing the yichud? Maybe, I don't know. It's a good kasha, I don't know. I would have to say that if you take the Alter Rebbe's words literally, he would say that it means right away. You're doing the chuppah in the yichud room and you walk out, I guess. I don't know. It's a good kasha. Yeah?
They touch each other during the chuppah. Even though you don't tell them, but you're...
Negiah, Jesus. So did you cause that they touch each other? I don't know. I don't think so.
Tell them.
They tell them to what? To
Tell them to pass the tzubah.
Haishata, heißt es.
Let's say.
Der Reise, der Rabbanon. Shkoyach. Ten l'chachem v'yach kamei, Shkoyach, have a great day.